Hi everyone, welcome once again to 51 episode of Riding Tiger with Arijit, and I've got an amazing guest with me. Before I introduce our guest, Robert, let me tell you about what is Riding Tiger. You know, when you start your life, when you start your entrepreneurial venture, there is a huge risk that usually you take. And then when you start it, your business is acting as a risk taker along with you. So it is live. It has got a life as well. So when you start riding on it, you need lots many people to control it and then continue the journey. Now, to continue the journey, when you start your venture as a startup, it's a cup. So you feed milk to it. Eventually, it grows bigger and better, and it's hungry. So you need to feed it, not with milk, probably raw meat. And that raw meat is money. Now, how to control your money, how to manage it, and then continue the life of that risky journey is called entrepreneurship. You just can't stop it. If you stop, either the business will kill or you need to kill the business. So that's the kind of life usually each and every entrepreneur live, each and every entrepreneur sleeps in their daily life. So let me allow you to introduce my great, beautiful friend, Robert Bush. And Robert, how are you doing?
I'm fine, Arijit. Thank you for inviting me to Riding Tiger.
It's my pleasure. Regarding Robert, if you don't know, Robert served as a managing director of Dubai World, a global holding company of the government of Dubai. And guess what? He managed more than 30 billion funds in his career. This is not the end. It's a huge profile that he has got. And he advises presidents, kings, and queens of the world. Not only that, he's a serial entrepreneur, a public speaker, and of course, a great human being. That's more important in life. And if I go on and on, probably the entire show will be with his introduction. Rather, let me ask the person in this show, what is a new venture that he is doing? How did he started his career? And what's the kind of impact that he's going to make? Robert, over to you.
Oh, thank you. So, I don't like to stay idle. And before COVID happened, there were, there are good things and bad things about everything. And, I had made some promises before COVID and had these great plans, right? But, God laughs at the plans of human beings. And so many of the things that I thought were going to happen by this time didn't, but some of the things that I didn't know would happen already have. And so about 3 years ago, a friend of mine, Dikembe Mutumbo, was visiting Dubai. And I'd moved to Dubai in 2003, as you mentioned, to do some work for the government of Dubai. And I've lived in Dubai for the most part ever since then. So we're going on our 19th year and, got married and did a few things, but Dubai is my second home. And so about 3 years ago, a friend of mine was visiting Dikembe, who is an NBA Hall of Fame basketball player, born in the Congo, happens to be 7'3" tall. So he's a very giant of a man. But he was born and raised in the Congo, the DRC of Africa. He wasn't a basketball player, but he was blessed with height and athleticism. And he had got a scholarship to go to Georgetown University, which is a very fine university in Washington, D.C., to study medicine. He wanted to be a doctor. And so he gets to Georgetown, and everyone thinks that this giant of a man must be a basketball player. And he says, no, I'm here to study medicine. Make a long story short, because he was athletic and he played a lot of, soccer in Africa, as you know, soccer is much more popular in most of the world than is basketball. Everyone found out that he actually was quite good. To make a long story short, he went from not being a basketball player to being one of the best basketball players in the world. He played in the NBA 18 plus years, NBA Hall of Famer, #2 on the list of block shots, etc. And I don't know if you've heard over the last few years, this whole, basketball players and athletes should shut up and dribble and play the game.
Yep.
But, 20 years ago, when he was looking to make impact, because he never forgot where he came from, in the DRC, he took some of his first money from the NBA and he invested in building a hospital. Wow. Because he said to his mom, his mom had unfortunately passed related to some of the conflicts in the DRC, political conflicts and whatnot. And he said, well, you know, I want to make my mother proud because she wanted me to be a doctor. And now I'm a basketball player. I never thought in my wildest dreams I'd be doing that for a living. But so maybe instead I will help create doctors. I'm going to build a hospital. And he named it after his mother.
Wow.
And that hospital is now helped more than 900,000 patients in the DRC.
Wow.
And so he's one of the few people I've met whose career after being a professional athlete, I think is more admirable than what he did as a professional athlete. He sits on the Special Olympics. We launched a school last year where up to 1,000 students are getting a free education, free food, free transportation, all of that, his foundation pays for that. And he was telling me 3 years ago that, oh, I've done the hospital, it's going very well. I want to do a school. I'm going to name the school after my dad, and then I'm going to do a university, all these grand plans. And I'm like, you know, brother, how are you going to do all of that? You're not necessarily making that NBA money anymore. He says, well, I have a foundation. And initially it was, you know, people didn't quite know who's this basketball player talking about building hospitals and healthcare and education. No one knew and trusted me, but now I have a 2-decade track record. And so I've got all these different plans and I do it through my foundation. I said, well, you know, I don't know much about building foundations, but I do come from the financial world. I do come from the investment world. And I think that we can help create a flywheel for you. I think that I can use my entrepreneurial skills, my sense of purpose with your passion, and we can build a commercial enterprise that can have impact. So we started looking at commercial ideas. And because the Congo is so rich, as is Africa, as you know, with all kinds of commodities, coffee, cocoa, tea, and then cobalt and gold and all manner of minerals. But as you know, historically, the continent of Africa has been extracted. Americans and Europeans and others, they take these raw materials, they do the value added outside the country, and they make most of the profits. And so the farmers and the miners get a little bit, but the value added outside of the continent makes the lion's share of the money. So we decided on coffee because the Congo has very good coffee. And a lot of the world doesn't even know that they get the coffee from Africa. And most of the world doesn't know that the coffee came from Africa. Coffee came from Ethiopia and Yemen. And so when you think of coffee, you don't think of Ethiopia and Yemen, you think of Italian coffee. When you cocoa, you don't think of Ghana or the Ivory Coast, you think of Swiss chocolate. Yep. So we created a brand. Since you said we were going to have a coffee, I've got my coffee cup here. I don't know if you can really see it. This is the Mutumbo coffee cup, 17 ounces. I start some of my days with a nice cup of our coffee. Sometimes I have our hot chocolate, which we're launching soon. But so the point was, let's take raw materials coming out of the continent of Africa, put an African man's name on it that is beloved and respected for his career, professional basketball sports career, and his global philanthropy, and let's create demand. And we now focus on farmers in Africa with the specific focus on female farmers. And we are building a market for them, and we're having a great time of it. Now, when I made that promise to Deke before COVID, I didn't realize that the COVID thing was going to happen. So imagine as an entrepreneur, and I like how you opened the show with regards to risk, right? So supply chain risk and global trade risk and currency risk, all of that became exacerbated in the time of COVID. Yep. But I'm an entrepreneur. I have a very strong sense of purpose. My partner has a very strong sense of passion. So we decided we were going to build a commodities company anyway, creating value added and linking farmers and investing in those farmer communities. And so that's what we've done.
Brilliant, brilliant. And when we are talking about taking things directly from Africa, especially Ghana, I'm sure that you have probably produced cocoa as well as coffee, both. And as a rather I would say as a avid coffee lover, I usually love the smell of coffee rather than before I drink it. So a lot of people, let me tell you this, a lot of people probably don't know this. When you drink a coffee, if you actually stir it well before you put lot many water into it, and then you have that smell, you can actually understand what kind of coffee, which region it is coming from, and what kind of combination you can probably do with your coffee. And that's how I love to drink my own coffee when I make it. Can you please show it to our audience, your probably your one of your packets which you have created, which I'm sure that which is healthier for people and people who do workout, mainly the power lifters. For them, they usually go for a pre-workout, which usually combines a fat, which is good fat, along with coffee, because caffeine with fat gives you hiccup of your energy when you start your workout. It goes into your blood, it consumes, it goes to your liver, it flows into your body, and then you can go for the power lifting. Do you care to share a little bit
Wow.
about this product?
Arijit, nicely done. Yes, so there are really wonderful health benefits to good commodities, cocoa, coffee. You know, most people think they're drinking coffee, but you got your Starbucks and these guys. So that's not real coffee, right? That's got your creams and your sugars, and it's got all this extra stuff. It's coffee flavored, but it's basically a coffee flavored hot beverage. And there's nothing wrong with that. These big brands have done a really good job of marketing it, and you got your ice frappe, and you got your this and the that, all of that stuff in it. And there are these great places you can go and commune with your friends and your family and your buddies. So that's great. So, but what we're doing, and I think a lot of your members of your audience will be surprised and appreciate this, is we're focusing on specialty coffee. So you really can, the Arabica coffee and our blends are really high end. We have Q graders, which are in the coffee world are like the sommeliers of wine. These are people that have studied the bean, the texture, the flavor, the notes, and they score all the coffees that we use in our blends and our single origin. It's about a specialty coffee so that you don't have to dilute it with all this extra stuff. You can, as you can say, from the smell of it, from the taste of it, the mouthfeel of it, really know that you're drinking something exceptional that also happens to come from Africa. So this is a product that we haven't even put on our website yet. You're the first show that we're showing this to. This is really hot off the press. This is our cocoa, and this comes from Ghana. And Ghana and the Ivory Coast represent more than 50% of the cocoa beans that's in the Swiss chocolate that's famous for it, the Swiss cocos. That's African cocoa beans, right? So we're very proud of our product. We're very proud that we're able to take these raw materials, these commodities out of Africa and package it. And I'm looking forward to not only giving you some, so on your next coffee talk, you have some cocoa or some hot chocolate, but also make sure that your readers can get it. So I think we'll make sure that there's a link in your social media, so if people want to go to the website or go to or purchase it from our shop, they'll be able to do so. At the moment, we're primarily selling out of the US, but we just started roasting out of Dubai. We're expected to be selling out of Europe soon. We're looking for distribution partners. We're looking for cafe partners in Europe and around the world that appreciate our mission and our cause and want to actually serve great African coffee.
Brilliant, brilliant. In fact, I know a gentleman here. When I was giving my TEDx talk, I met a person who is basically probably an evangelist in coffee, and he started probably an amazing cafe in India, in the western part of India. So we had a deep chat regarding the same. Would love to see this brand goes worldwide. And when we talk about cocoa, when we talk about giving impact to people, you created a brand which is based on coffee, but in the background, could you please tell our audience that how many number of lives you have touched upon? I'm sure when you are working with Agri, when you're taking mainly women and they are working with this, women always work with passion, especially with food and beverages. Could you please share a little bit about it?
Thank you for that, because that's really what this is about, right? It's about, you know, the Dikembe's desire to have greater impact, and can we do so? I'm much more of a believer in trade, not aid. I'm not interested in charity. I'm interested in jobs and providing opportunity. And so when we started looking at the industry, the agricultural industry, we saw a couple of interesting things in that supply chain and in the value chain, the role that women play. And most of the women are in the harvest. They're in the fields and they're picking the cherries. So there's a lot of gender inequity in the value chain and the supply chain for coffee and cocoa. And so we looked deeper, but what we found is that farms where there were women that had leadership positions, those villages did better. For some reason, when the farmer and the cooperative had men and women sharing responsibilities, not in this role playing where the man controlled the money and the women did the harvest, but there was a true communal effort to raise the quality of the beans or the product, to help with figuring out the right brokers and the exporters, et cetera. Those villages tended to do better. The kids were better educated. There was more, the village was able to create a much more sustainable model because it was taking in the human capital resources of the men and the female. So that's why we focused on women, is because the women were helping to create a better product. And if it wasn't, frankly, a better product, we wouldn't be interested, because that would be for our charity to do. My job is to find the best product with the best teams, with the best farms and best cooperatives. And we found the data is overwhelmingly clear that when women are part of that, that product is a better product. So that's the first thing. This is not just some feel-good, charity type of approach. I want to invest in my supply chain because it's smart to invest in the supply chain. So that's one. Now, with regards to the data around the quantifying the kind of impact, many of these farms, most of the farms globally are smallholder farms, which means a couple of things. That farming community doesn't have a lot of pricing leverage. The average farm in Africa is less than 2.5 hectares,
Wow.
which is 4 or 5 acres. And they have to figure out how they're going to make a living for that farmer, for that family, off of 4, maybe 5 acres of land. They also have to do so and not necessarily have the best fertilizer. They also have to do so, and there is no mechanization, tractors, and all of this industrial kind of stuff. This really is a labor of love that is creating tuition money and food for that family. And so the impact that we can make when we know that we can, because of Mr. Mutombo's name and branding, and because of the team that we have, to create demand that actually impacts a farm where there are 10 or 15 lives on that farm, and then a couple of other workers, 20 to 25 people all in per farm. And we can multiply that by the tens of thousands of farms that we're bringing coffee from out of Africa. That's why it didn't matter if it was COVID or any other shock. We knew we were going to get this done because we've looked in the eyes of these communities, these women. They've come on our webinars. We've interviewed them to try to figure out those that are export ready. And we made a promise as a company. If you can create a great product and you are export ready, we're going to find markets that's going to appreciate your labor. Keep up the good work. There are people out here that care about good quality coffee, and we're going to create a brand. And on shows like this is how we do the outreach. And so we're happy that what the model that we're creating is literally able to touch tens of thousands of lives.
Super amazing, super amazing. So I have a question for you. If I look at the entire career of yours, which is more than probably 2.5 decades or more than that, you started your life as an entrepreneur. Eventually, you started managing money, and eventually you started managing large capitals for corporates, and then went into a complete different vertical of giving probably inputs to governments, to the family offices, to the kings and queens. And then you went back to the roots and you wanted to give back to the community. That's the sign of a real entrepreneur. Probably that's my life story as well, but this is not my show. But I would love to ask you this question: that what is the key thing that told you in your mind that I want to give back, and that's the reason probably I'll get back to Africa, talk to these farmers, and then bring them in front of the world so that these guys can have their livelihood. You're not actually creating a business, rather you are creating an impact, and maybe the way you are doing it through coffee. So coffee is probably the root, but my question is, what is the key thing that made you do this, shifting the complete vertical?
Yes, thank you for that. Because so you talked about risk, right? And there's the risk that comes in trying to understand the market. One, there's the risk when you're trying to understand your customer. But the biggest risk is trying to understand yourself and making sure that you have the skills and the tools required to get the job done. And so I couldn't have, I'm in my mid 50s. I could not have the impact that I think we're going to have, God willing, with our coffee business, with our cocoa business, with our tea business, with our soft ag business 30 years ago. I needed those fundamentals. I needed to mitigate my own risk and understanding fundamentally, how does economics work? How does finance work? How does marketing work? How does sales work? All of these components that make for a successful business, and then having enough of a track record so I can get on shows like yours and get other people that will buy into my chairman's vision and my purpose. And they can see, well, gosh, we want to be part of what Bob is doing. We want to be part of what Mr. Mutumbo is doing, because we have now a 30-plus-year track record of success. And that success didn't come smoothly. Lots of hiccups, lots of mistakes, lots of knocks. And so resiliency is an important part. And maybe we can talk about a little bit about that. But to get to the heart of the question, so why did we end up, after all of these fancy assignments and working on Wall Street in New York and working for governments in Europe and the European Commission and the Abu Dhabi government and talking to Saudis about this and all of that, something so basic like coffee and the food chain and food security, because it's a big problem. You know, one of the things I'm quite disappointed in is that all this technology that we have, and all this money that is made in Silicon Valley, and all this money that is on Wall Street and this accumulation of wealth, what problems are being solved? Do we need another DoorDash, another Uber Eats? They're great, they're convenient, but how impactful is that? Does it move the dial? Does it move people out of poverty? Does it give food security? Is the model economically sustainable? Are we hurting the environment when we do so? Are our models environmentally sustainable? So I have the pleasure of having enough energy and life in me, and not having been beat down by life's travails, to still dream, to still hope, to still take the accumulation of all these skills that I've accumulated and network and friends that believe in what I'm doing and are hopeful as well, to say, let's get back into some really fundamental, deeply rooted issues in our society. Gender inequity between men and women. Most of the world is still, particularly in Africa, you know, almost 2/3 of workers in Africa are still associated with the agricultural sector.
Yep.
We can talk about going to Mars and all this great technology, but 2/3 of this continent is their livelihood is linked to agriculture.
Yep.
Not industrialization, but agriculture, something that the US moved beyond 100 years ago. So I'm interested on hard problems. I'm interested in deeper questions, and I'm interested in finding kindred spirits that can take the technology and the tools and the science and the passions and figure out how to de-risk harder problems. And I'm very fortunate that at this stage in my career, I can take all of those learnings and do something like try to figure out how to get tens of thousands of small farm holders, creating a global product around that to reach a global audience. That makes me happy. And guess what? It makes my mother even happier.
I'm sure. Robert, I have a question. What is life for you?
Wow, you don't have a show long enough for me to properly answer that. So one of the things, and let me just make sure, because I want to just check my battery here. I think we're okay there. I think we maybe have about 10 minutes on my laptop battery. So I've got a couple of things on that, right? So firstly, this notion of chasing happiness, I'm not for it. Chasing happiness means you have to have happenings. Something has to happen usually for you to be happy. And I don't want to chase things. I don't want to chase happenings in order to get my happiness. You know, I like to take metaphors and analogies from the investment in the financial world. And I'm sure you remember this guy, Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who talked about anti-fragility.
Yep.
And so it's like resilience 2.0. So resilience 1.0 is, can you bounce back from some kind of stress or pressure to get back to your status quo? That's being resilient. But Taleb came up with this concept of anti-fragility, which is, can you use the same stress and make yourself stronger, right? And so when I think about my life and what I'm trying to accomplish and what life is about, I'm looking for how to make myself and my business models and my partners anti-fragile. So when shocks are coming and others start to tire or their business models fray, one of the benefits that we have of building a business in the middle of COVID, I had to think about risk day one. I had to try to figure out, how do we shock proof our business day one? Because I didn't have the luxury of a 2 to 3 year positive runway of growth. We started the business in COVID, so we needed supply chain diversity. We needed business plan continuity. We needed to make sure we had surplus access to capital. We needed to make sure we had additional suppliers and additional roasters. So for me, life is about trying to figure out how to embrace the challenges to make myself stronger. And by the way, you know, you talked about how power lifters use coffee to help them in their regimen, etc. Our bodies are actually anti-fragile.
Yes.
How do you build muscle? You build muscle, as you know, by putting it under stress. That's how muscles grow. If you don't put them under stress, you get weaker. So can we take that kind of mindset that God has given us and how our bodies work and apply it to our mental capacity, apply it to our mindset? And yes, we can. And so to me, life is about seeking out challenges, measuring myself against those challenges so that I go stronger through them. And then through my strength, I'm able to help others do the same.
Brilliant. One last question, only one last question.
Yes, sir.
Imagine that you are in a park and there is only one single bench. There is no other bench. And the park is really beautiful with full of greeneries, a lot of flowers, wind is there. And you want to sit with someone in that park, in that bench, and you want to talk very deep with that person. Who that person would be? It can be more than one, doesn't matter. You don't need to give name, but maybe.
No, that's great. I like the question. I've had versions or variations of that question before, and I haven't really thought about this in a while. So here's the first thing I would do when I get on that bench. Before inviting anybody, and you touched upon it, can I hear the birds chirp? Can I appreciate the sky, the trees? You know, can I zoom in to see, is there a squirrel in that branch? What about the ants making all this life? You're actually not alone. Already, you're not alone. So can you sit and center yourself and appreciate all that nature has surrounded you with and not invite anybody? Can you be comfortable with where you are and what you have? I think this is a key. And my bet is that if you can appreciate all that beauty and subtle activity around you and be still, that energy that you create, you're going to attract someone that feels and thinks the same way. And that will be the pleasant surprise. I don't have to invite you. When you show up, I'm going to say, I've been waiting for you. Please have a seat with me.
Brilliant, 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 Robert. I have been actually asking this question probably 50 of different people, but amazing, amazing answer. It's pretty unique. And of course, it's deep, real deep. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing all those insights. You are full of life. I wish you all the best and the new venture to flourish. And I'll ask all our audience to kindly click on the link, which I'll be putting inside the video link itself. You can click on the link, go to the website, order the coffee, and that will help a lot many humanities and human beings. Please feel free to comment. Please feel free to subscribe, and please feel free to get in touch with them. It's not about coffee. It's basically about a cup of life. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Arijit. My pleasure. See you.